Right, apologies about the last video having no voiceover. I did not realise my microphone was not connected again. It's becoming a regular habit and I do apologise. However, in the last video it was only setting up the project and should be easy to follow for everyone. It was done at a slow enough pace. If you need any help, just ask me and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So, we're going to now work on the snake script that we created. So the snake script will hold any behaviors that we need for the snake. Okay, so if you double click on that to open Visual Studio or Mono Develop, depending on which version of Unity you have, we'll get started. So, some things to make aware. When it says using Unity Engine and using system.collection, it's getting information from the scripting language Unity uses. So it's getting you all the variable types, all the components that Unity uses. So there's one more that we want to add, and that is using system. Okay, so below this parentheses, which are the curly brackets, you must always have an open and close one once you have a curly bracket, otherwise there's a syntax error. Okay, down here we're going to have our public variables. Now a public variable or a public accessor, there are three types. There's public, private and protected that we'll be focusing on. Public, which we'll be using in this instance, means that we can change the data anywhere in our scripts, but also once the script is attached in our inspector. So we'll be able to change any variable we make public. However, since the game controller will be handling direction and movement and whatever, we're going to keep some of the variables in here private for that snake class because we won't be using it that much. So this script won't be long. So first of all, I want you to make a private variable, call it snake, so it's deriving our snake class, and call it next. Okay, we also want to make a static public variable, and we want it to be an action, and in this parameter make it a string, and we're going to call this hit. So once the object has been hit once, it will detect to see if the objects have collided. Like so. Okay, now with a private variable you can't access that data in any other script. You have to use something called getters and setters to be able to do that. So to do that we need to make two functions. A function is a behavior of a game. So for example, void start and void update. They're the ones that Unity comes with. And in this instance we don't need these functions because nothing's going to be updated in this script and nothing's going to start in this script. Okay, so we need to make a couple of our own. So we need to first set the next snake. So type in public void set next, call it snake in. Okay, and next, make sure it's the curly brackets, not the square ones like I just did there. So next is equal to in. Semicolon at the end. A semicolon also is needed at the end of most sections unless it's an if or else statement or a switch statement, etc. But we'll go more into that further tutorials. We next need to get our next variable. So to do this we just return the next variable. So public snake and get next. These function names can be named whatever you like, by the way. However, it's always good to keep your code neat and tidy. So every time you set a variable and get it, it's always important to name it appropriately. And we're going to return that variable, like so. Okay. Other things that the snake script will consist of, excuse me, is deleting of the snake tail, and also collisions, because the snake object is in our scene already, so we'll need to check to see if anything's colliding with it. So, create a new function, call this one public void delete tail. Again, it can be named whatever you want, however it gets less confusing for you if you name them appropriately to what that function is going to do. I'm just going to type in destroy this .game object. So, in our game controller script eventually, once we call this function in there, it will delete the tail of the object, normally when it collides with something. Okay, and then we're going to create another option, another function I should say, called void on trigger enter. And this is one of the functions that Unity that pre-comes with Unity. So on trigger enter must be spelt like that, otherwise it won't work. And in the parameters, which is these brackets, they're called parameters, you need to call the collider, and you need to name it other or whatever you choose. The reason why we're not setting this as an on trigger enter 2D is because if you remember earlier we made a cube, which is a 3-dimensional object. If it was a 2D object like a sprite, you'd just put 2D at the end of on trigger enter and also on the end of collider. So in here we need to check if anything's being hit. So if hit is equal to null, like so, open close brackets, we need to check if it's hit anything else. So hit other dot transform dot tag. So this will be used to check if it's collided with the tail or the snake again. Okay? If, for example, so for this section, if I just clarify again, so if it's hit anything associated with the snake, so the tail or the snake head, it will detect that it's hit that object. Eventually it will destroy. However, if it hits, so if other dot tag equals food, so if it collides with anything called or tagged as food, it will destroy the food game object, like so. Okay, if you control S that to save it, that is your snake script done. We don't need to add anything more to this for the time being. So go back into Unity and just grab the snake script and just drag and drop it into your snake inspector. Make sure snake is selected. Nothing shows up in the inspector for the script at the moment because we've got no public variables for us to be able to change. Okay, nextly is not even a word. You want to create a new empty game object, create empty, and rename it to game controller, like so. Okay, file, excuse me, save scene, and file, save project. So, in the next part we'll start going into the game controller and adding things to that. So I'll see you then.